Okay, this is your second to last homework, and it involves using Java to run a web server, which is kind of an advancement in difficulty level because it's not just Java anymore. You're going to have to learn the Java MVC Spring web framework, which is actually very complicated, way too complicated to go over thoroughly in even a single course, let alone a single week. But you can get started on it and you can kind of feel out the parts of it that are easy and the parts of it that are hard. So I'm going to demo everything that I want you to demo in your video. So starting roughly now is what I'd like you to do. And you're going to start the same way that I am right now, which is you're allowed to reference these objectives, and then you're going to run through and actually do them. So that's what I'm about to do. So I'm going to start here with download and import a Spring MVC starter project. So let's do it. I'm going to start from a completely blank slate here. I will open up Eclipse. I'll need that in just a moment. And then I'm going to click this. I'm going to download that. It says GS serving web content main.zip. I downloaded one earlier today, but you're going to download a fresh one. So I'll do that. And then it should finish relatively quickly. You will, of course, unzip it. And for me, depending on where it unzips, it might not be clear where it went because the folder, when they zipped it up, was, I guess, created in 2023, but it should be there. GS serving web content main. Just remember where it is. So for me, it was in downloads because we're now going to do the next part. So we downloaded, now we need to import it. So that happens over in Eclipse. So I'm going to finish opening up Eclipse here. So here's Eclipse. It's got my text adventure code in it, which we will actually use in a moment on the last step where we import text adventure code and display content from text adventure. But we've got a lot standing in the way. We have to import that project. So we're going to do that by going to File, Import. And then in this list, you're going to select Maven and then existing Maven projects. Click Next. And then in the root directory, we're going to find that folder we just unzipped. So it's in Downloads, GS Serving, Web Content Main. Yours might be somewhere else. Doesn't really matter where you put it, just as long as you can find it. Select that folder. You should see complete POM XML and initial POM XML because there's actually two projects in that folder we unzipped. And then we're going to say Finish. And notice that it imports two projects. And at this point, everything should work. If you have like red X's, then there's something misconfigured about Eclipse, so let me know. But this, for me, imported quite smoothly. This starter project comes from a tutorial online, and so there's the initial version and then the complete version. We're just going to ignore initial. You can even delete it if you want. Doesn't matter. I'm going to do that now so that we don't get confused. And we're looking at serving web content complete. You can open it up. And this tricky part number one is how do you find the folder, or how do you find the file that you actually run? And I will tell you that it is source main Java, and it is serving web content application.java, which we will run. So press run once you have that one open. And then if it's working, you should see this fancy ASCII art that says Spring Boot. And notice one of the log lines says Tomcat started on port 8080. Tomcat started on port 8080. So what that means is you can open up a browser. So that we've run it, and we are ready to view in the web browser at localhost :8080. You should see this. Get your greeting here. If you click greeting, it redirects you to localhost 8080/greeting, and it says hello world. So if you got that far, then you have downloaded and imported Spring MVC, run it and viewed it in the web browser, and now you're ready to start making changes. So we'll make a change to the content you are displaying. This is the content. And you might wonder, where is that? Where is that in the Java code? Like, what Java code is creating this thing we see on the website? And it can be kind of hard to find, but if you root around in all of these files long enough, you'll find greetingcontroller.java. So I'll just direct your attention there. And still, it's a little tricky. So where's hello world? Well, here's the word world. And we see model add attribute name, and then it says return greeting, but it's like, where is hello? But let's see if this changing world here does anything. I'll say hello, Steven. And then, I don't know if you noticed, but something flashed down here, which tells us that the server reloaded. So if we refresh the page, it did work. So we've located the place where world is coming from. But it's always a little bit of an Easter egg hunt when you're trying to figure out how a new piece of software is set up. And it took me some time as well, but I poked around with this before I made this video, obviously, so I know that one part of the content is coming from this variable name, which is actually one of the parameters to this greeting function. It's a little bit hard to see. There's some new syntax here called an annotation. So there's this request param annotation. All of that comes before this string name and model. And all of that is in the context of this method, which is also annotated with this get mapping greeting. There's a lot going on here. But long story short, this name stores either this default value Steven or whatever is inside the query string. So if I say name Bob, then that variable stores Bob. It only stores Steven when it's not supplied. So consider this your like whirlwind tour to how web programming works, is that user types in or follows a link, and then there's stuff up in the query string of the URL, which is everything after the question mark. And then it's kind of like variables, like keys and values. So name equals Bob. The magic under the hood of Java Spring MVC, that whole platform we're using, under the hood takes that out of the URL and stores it inside of this string name. Now, is that the end of the story? It's not, because we see that it adds that name into the model and binds it to yet another thing called name. So if we said Jimmy right here, we say add attribute name Jimmy, then we've actually severed the connection. So now this variable name's not getting used. Name is always Jimmy. So if we refresh, it says hello Jimmy, even though we said name equals Bob. If you want to follow the rabbit hole one level further, we have to note that it's saying return greeting right here, which maps to, and this I think would take you a lot of research if you were trying to figure this out on your own, so I'll just tell you. This maps to a template, another file over here in resources. So source main, resources, templates, greeting.html. Return greeting means render the HTML in this file. So we are gonna click and open with a text editor, which opens it up in Eclipse. And we can see now the HTML that's getting rendered. And if we look very carefully, we can see hello, comma, $, curly brace, name, exclamation point. And this should now reveal at least one other mystery, which is where was all this other stuff coming from? Hello and exclamation point. Jimmy gets plugged in right there. So now, if we want, we can edit this template. Like we could add additional exclamation points, refresh, and we see that come out. Or we could even just get rid of the hello and the exclamation points, which is what I would recommend. And refresh, and now the only thing getting rendered on this page is the name, which happens to be Jimmy. But if I save this again, now it should be whatever is in the query param. And so it should be Bob. Bob. If that's the name, then that's what gets rendered. So basically anything up here in the URL becomes content in the web page. That's what this web server currently does. That's what this code in Java currently does. If I do something like this, ask yourself for a moment what will happen. This web server now takes whatever's in the query parameter, duplicates it 3 times, and then that becomes the web content. So if I write Bob, we see Bob 3 times. Okay. So that is basically, I've showed that we can make a change to the web content that's being displayed by messing around with the Java code. You can show me that however you want. And we can do it by messing around with a template code, because they kind of work together. The Java code here can manipulate this variable that it's storing into the model. And then it does a kind of handoff over to the HTML code by returning the name of a file, an HTML file, that it's going to render. So you can change what comes out on this web page, but by messing with 2 different places. Okay, now let's do the interesting thing, which is we're going to import our text adventure code and display content from the text adventure. Now this week, you don't have to get your whole text adventure working. That's actually really tough. So just going to display some content from the text adventure. So basically going from something that was purely text, just a text-based game, I'm going to move it in the direction of a website. Still a text adventure, just going to be on the web now. Okay, so let's see how that part works. So first things first is you have to make sure your text adventure code is actually working. If it's in a buggy state, you got to fix it first. Easiest way would be to just take all of your text adventure code. So for me, it's all this stuff. Copy it and stick it somewhere into the Serving Web Content Complete project. I'm going to stick it right into the same folder as the greeting controller and the Serving Web Content application. Is that the best place for it ultimately? Maybe not, but it's pretty easy to move these things, so let's just put it there to start with. And now I'll close up everything and then reopen, let's say, how about Castle Setup? And you'll notice that Eclipse did something kind of nice when I pasted it in, which is it added the package line at the top. Otherwise, everything would be broken. But it looks like it imported fine because there's no errors. So that's always good. So let me open up Text Adventure here. Text Adventure was where the main method was. And I just want to draw your attention to the parts of this that get the text adventure off the ground, which is creating a new adventure graph, calling game setup create adventure. And then essentially that's it. It just creates a main character, gets the first room, and then it starts printing things out about that room. So I think what I will do is pull this line over to greeting controller. Let me split so that you can see it more easily. So I'll stick that into greeting controller. I'll stick the current room into greeting controller. And now, instead of name here, how about I say current room dot get description. Because name was a string, like Bob. Current room's description is a string, so I could just say that that's the name now. And save and refresh, and it says you're standing in an old dusty castle. So it's just one step closer to being a text adventure. So import your text adventure code, display the content from your text adventure. That's it. That's done. So everything up to now is what you would do if you want to do the minimum for next week. I will give bonus points to those of you who want to go above and beyond. And so for the rest of this video, I'm going to show you some things that you could do to go above and beyond, and hopefully explain to you in Spring MVC a little bit better. But that's all you technically have to do. Anything else after this is both good for you to know, and I'll give bonus points if you do it. So let's dive into that now. So first things first is, what if I wanted this to be more like the text adventure? I want it to say the room you're in, the description, and list out the exits. Well, a few things I'd like to do is just get all of that onto the screen somehow. So let's make a variable string. I'll call it content. And I'll take this little bit right there and move it up, and then plug that in. Just a small refactoring. I really changed almost nothing just now. I just created a variable. And the only reason I did that is because I wanted to add even more stuff onto the variable. So actually, I think I'll start with string content equals current room dot toString. Because if I remember correctly, that is how you render out the title of a room. Yeah, so it says throne room. And now onto that, I can start adding additional stuff. Like I could say content plus equals current room dot get description. I always like when two lines just line up at the end. For some reason, it's aesthetically pleasing. It just happens by magic sometimes. Let's see what that is. Okay, yeah. So throne room, you're standing in an old dusty castle. It's looking pretty good. I could try to add the exits, but this kind of doesn't look great. I'd like that to be on another line. So I'm just letting my aesthetics guide me here. Anytime there's something that looks like it could be better, I'm going to go on a quick side quest to try to deal with that. The first thing you might consider trying would be to add a new line, because in Java, that's usually how you would put something on a new line. But welcome to rule of the web number 1, is new lines don't do anything. You might have seen that that got rendered as kind of like as white space, just like a space, like space bar basically. But new line does not make a new line in the web. What does make a new line in the web is a break tag, like that. But welcome to annoying thing about the web number 2, which is you can't always just stick in raw HTML and expect it to render out. I didn't know how to do that myself, and so I had to Google it. And what I Googled was Java MVC Spring Timeleaf, because that is the library they're using for templating underneath. That's not super important, but I said Timeleaf render raw HTML, and I guess this is the one I ended up doing. Yeah, and it gave me this piece of code right here. I copied that over to this greeting HTML file. So instead of this p tag th text, I pasted in this, which I found from Stack Overflow, which has a thu text. And then I'm going to delete that. I could put name here. In fact, I have to put name here, even though what we're rendering is definitely more than just a name. But now it works. So I put a break tag and it's on a new line. If I put 2 break tags, then it'll be 2 lines down. So that's already looking better, getting more control over the HTML that renders out. Now I can start doing things just to clean up the code. Like how about I call this new line, and I make a variable called string new line equal to that, because I might want to add new lines in other places as well. What if I want throne room to be like bold? Start using the vocabulary of the web, basically, because we're not bound by just raw text anymore. We can have markup text. We can say like h1 and then close tag h1. Hopefully you've taken some HTML in the past and it's not totally new. But basically now throne room is kind of bold and looks like a header because we wrapped the throne room, or the room's name, in h1 tags. Now, if we wanted to do that again, it might be nice to actually have like a method that did that. So we could make a quick like helper method. Let's call it h1. It'll take in a string and it will return h1 plus that string plus a closing h1 tag. And then instead of doing that up here, I could just say h1 and wrap up that string. And then it should do the same thing. Yeah. But now, if I wanted to, I can make other things be h1s. Like maybe that one. Maybe I want them to both be h1s. And now, you know, the sky's the limit. Actually, I could add the 1 right here as a parameter, because maybe I want this one to be an h2. I could change my h1 function to be an h function that takes a level, and then instead of the 1 being written down there, I can plug it in. Just a time saver for later. Yeah, so now this is it. This is an h1, this is an h2. It's looking reasonably good. If I don't like the fact that it's all flush up against one side, I could go over to greeting and start adding things. I could just write some raw HTML. Something like, I don't know, width 100 pixels. Save that. Let's see what that does. Hard to tell that it did anything, but yeah, actually didn't do anything. Interesting. Okay, let me try one other thing. Let me try wrapping this div inside of another div and adding the style there. Say 100 pixels. Also, just to make sure I can see something, let me say background color gray. Okay, the background color gray. Oh, I think it's just background. Not background color. Yeah, okay, that worked. Instead of background, let me say border 1 pixel solid black. Let me give it some padding, maybe 50 pixels, and then margin auto, which I think might put it in the center. Yeah, okay. That's starting to look better. 100 pixels maybe is a little too few. Let's do that. Okay, I like that. Throne room. You're standing in an old dusty castle. It's looking better now. So fine with me. I think I'd like it to render the exits now. So let's do that. So we are we are building up the string content, and we're still binding it to this value name, which kind of bugs me. It's not a name anymore. That was just that's just left over from this the fact that we borrowed this code, that we downloaded it from a greeting that said hello world. It's no longer a name. So maybe how about we just call that content? That seems better. Now, will that break stuff? Almost certainly. Yeah. Where did our content go? That's not good. So the fact that we changed that part of the Java means we need to change this part of the HTML template. Right there. It needs to say content. And then it should be fixed again. Yeah. Okay. It's looking good. So we string content. We make an H1. We add on a new line. We could even do that on a new line. Well, let's say content plus equals new line, and then we'll say content plus equals this H2. So H1, new line, H2, and now let's say content plus equals something about the rooms. So for inspiration there, let's say we don't know what we're writing right here. Let's open up textadventure.java and use some of that code to tell us what to do. Here, for example, is where it lists out the exits. So how about I just copy that code right here? Now, does it work immediately? No, but more of it works than you might expect. So exits, current room, get adjacent rooms works. And then it says system.out.println exits. System.out.println is a great way to get something to show up down here, but it won't make anything show up in the web page. For that, we have to be appending onto this content string. So let's do that. Let's say content plus equals exits. And then instead of this system.out.println, let's say content plus equals whatever was there before. And we'll just delete anything that doesn't make sense. Like inventory size, how about we just get rid of that? No errors now. Let's see what that gives us. Hey, that's looking pretty good. Exits 1, door to throne room. Okay. Okay, now I bet you if there were 2 exits, they would show up mashed onto the same line. We can do that. We can test that by changing castle setup. And in the throne room, let's make 2 exits. So throne room, we add an adjacent room, which is door to throne room. Let's just add a brand new room. How about a secret throne room chamber? Secret room. Secret room. And then throne room, add adjacent room. Secret room. Okay, so now I've made it so throne rooms do legitimately have 2 rooms adjacent to them. And yeah, it seems to be putting the exits on new lines, but it's not really. But I bet we could just say this, content plus equals new line. That's our break right there. Maybe we can even do a new line right after the exits. The word exits. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, yeah, it did. Okay. Exits, door to throne room, secret throne room chamber. So that's pretty good. I like that. There's a lot of ways we could keep cleaning this up, but it's. I think this is enough to kind of show you the direction that you can go. You can start making this look however you want using whatever styling or cool HTML or CSS you happen to know. For the very last bonus of make it look nicer is I'd like to start moving in a direction of actually being able to navigate this game. Like, actually what would be really nice is if you just click door to throne room and it literally like takes you into that next room. That'd be really sweet. But let's go there a little bit more slowly. Which is, let's use that parameter. Remember we got rid of this name parameter? Doesn't do anything. But it's still here in the code. So when we go to /greeting, we're allowed to put in name equals, and then it ends up being stored inside this variable. So instead of name, I wonder if we could say something like int room. And then we'll say room here. Required false default value may be 0. I don't know for sure this is actually going to work. Cannot convert from int to string. Okay, fine. How about 0, a string? In fact, let's make this a string, since that's what it was before, and I don't want to have to change it. And we could just start by putting room into the content, so it'll just print that out. Yeah, there is 0. Oh, yeah. Okay. I was wondering why it showed up in a bunch of other places, and it's because I actually changed the meaning of new line to include the room number. That's a little bit weird. I'm going to get rid of that. I just wanted to see that the number 0 printed out. And now, where am I going to use 0? I was planning to use it on the room that's currently selected. So I'm going to pass in room right there. And the one problem is that it's a string, and that needs to be a number because we're getting something out of a list. So let's just use, well, quick pop quiz. How do you turn a string into a number or a string into an integer in Java? It is just one Google search away, so it's not hard to find, but it's something that comes up so often that probably it's good to remember. It's integer.parseInt. Yeah, and then room is the integer we parse. So it turns string 0 into regular number 0. And now, I think this should be pretty cool. Let's say room equals 0. Now we're in the throne room. How about room equals 1? We're at the drawbridge. And notice it renders everything perfectly. Now we're at the moat. Tells us what the exits are. Renders the description. Whatever room we enter, as long as that actually exists, it renders the content here in the web page. So you can kind of see how that might be one step closer to actually having a navigatable text adventure. Probably we'll get an error if we do too many rooms, or a room number that's too high. 7, 8. Yeah, there it is. So once we go to 8, the web server crashes because it tries to access a room that doesn't exist. But for all the rooms that do exist, everything works quite well. So that's it. That's it for today. So most of that was bonus, making it look nicer and making it start to be a navigable text adventure. And yeah, that's where I'm going to leave the video for today. So everything I showed in the first part of the video is required for your next homework. A lot of that bonus stuff is just bonus, but You're gonna need it eventually as we do one more iteration on this Java Spring MVC web server module, where we'll take your text adventure and move it even closer to being something that runs as a website. All right, see you next time.